So we've got 161 EHGVs on the road now as a result of this project.
So we look at alternative fuel like hydrogen. Will there be a mixture of electric, hydrogen, synthetic?
They sort themselves out. They'll pull up, they'll park up, the machine will plug them in, they'll do what they got to do and they'll move on. I think the main ticket in town is fully electric.
Hey Sam, welcome to the episode. It's really great to have you here in our little podcast on the road studio at Move 26.
That's great. Thank you for having me.
Sam, you're the head of EHGV at GRIDSERVE. What does that mean? Tell me a little bit about the job that you do at GRIDSERVE and kind of how long you've been either in automotive or in EVs.
Well, that's a big question, I suppose. I have been in EVs, believe it or not, for 23 years. So it's been my life, really, my career entirely, electric vehicles. At GRIDSERVE, which is the busiest charge point operator in the UK, I've been there nearly 8 years now in various capacities. I've done lots of different roles. It was a business that didn't exist and is now the busiest in the country for providing public charging. And then more recently than that, for the last 3 years, I've been running the HGV, the electric heavy goods vehicle part of the business as a result of winning quite a sizable Innovate UK grant fund a few years ago. So I've done all sorts of stuff in the EV community and EV world. But my main focus at GRIDSERVE for the last few years has been on the big stuff, the real hard to decarbonise sector.
Yeah, I think we've obviously heard a lot about passenger car, transitioning to EV, but until you've got the large goods, you're never going to reach net zero. I suppose that's the ultimate goal with electrification, isn't it? In this, that's the reason that government are kind of pushing that. Talk a little bit about the grant then, because I know one of the things that you've been the architect of is that kind of electric freightway. Just talk a little bit about that and the grant and what that has meant and the work you've been doing in the last few years.
Yes, it was my crazy idea that a few years ago I got a message from one of the chaps at DFT saying there's some funding available potentially for heavy goods vehicle charging and it might suit you. And I thought to myself, well, actually that really does, because we've already got a network that is across the motorway service areas. Recognizing this is another need. That's another area of the transport sector that needs, and a significant one actually, even though it's a low amount of mileage on the road, it's one of the biggest contributors to air pollution. It is the big stuff, the big trucks. So I think we were really well placed to be able to put something forward that proposed an opportunity in that particular competition. And we were successful in it. And not only that, we were the largest project of them all, 62.7 million pounds of grant funding, over £100 million project in totality, with 30 or 40 different hauliers and logistic companies to build something which was intended to be a catalyst for change, really. So electric vehicles are inherently more expensive on a capital outlay. We know this. In trucks, it's amplified, so they're 3 times as expensive as a traditional a diesel truck. And so the government project was there to try and be a catalyst for change, to try to help get the total cost of ownership model a little bit closer to parity with diesel as a result of some funding. And that's been the stimulus that's been required to get the big guys in the Maritimes and the Royal Mails and the Amazons and the Wincantons, GXOs, XPOs, all these big companies to be able to make that commitment and start the journey into the big trucks. We can learn from that. It's safe to say as well, a lot of those big companies are using smaller businesses that they contract to do their work too, which means that some of this money is getting down to the SME market as well. So we're getting lots of different companies of different sizes learning what it's like and being able to afford to do it in the early stage in this nascent market, which hopefully that information, when we've already started reporting and disseminating that information out, people can learn from that and then hopefully make some better and more informed decisions about how they can then make their next step into the world of electrification. So it's very much a journey. But it's one that we want to learn by doing. And that's what I think we've achieved in the last couple of years so far.
So has the investment largely been in, you mentioned the kind of the big logistic providers, the big sort of, truck operators, hauliers. Has that been providing the kind of fast charging at the depot? So depot got to return to that thing, you're going to go back somewhere. Or is it then in the kind of public charging infrastructure where those trucks need to be?
Yeah, so the lion's share of the funding was really to go on 3 pillars. The first one is trucks. So we've got 161 EHGVs on the road now as a result of this project, which is a large proportion of the total in the UK. So we're making meaningful difference there. The second pillar is depot charging. So we've got 12 depots that we've built infrastructure on behalf of the hauliers. so they can start that journey from base and then do back to base operations. And then critically, the third pillar for GRIDSERVE is the public charging. So we've got 2 sites live now in the country. We'll have another 2 in the next couple of weeks, this being the end of middle of June. So by middle of July, we'll have 4 public sites across the country, and we'll get up to 11 in total through this funding, which means we have a network. We have an actual network across the country people can lean into. So they've got support at depot, they've got vehicles, and then they've got public infrastructure. And that is the beginning of a market.
Yeah, I think I remember when the first one went live, it was like press everywhere, but it was really kind of modern, clean, huge amounts of charges, probably more than there were cars in the area at the time. It's like making sure that you've got enough of those fast charging hubs, particularly for kind of the haulier fleet where you've got big vehicles, you've got to get them charged. All of this also requires, I've been electrified for the last couple of years as well. And the technology in the heavier vehicles has been really quite, it's really advancing. And the work you're doing is going to require significant partnerships and, across industry. Yeah. How are they working at the moment? How the OEMs have obviously had to invest significantly as well. It's not just it's a whole industry has to kind of come on at the same pace. How well do you work with sort of those partners?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, I think. In some respects, I almost disagree in a way, in the sense that the trucks themselves aren't particularly different to a car. They've got bigger batteries, they've got bigger motors, they require more power, but fundamentally technology is the same. So in some respects, it's just bigger versions of the things. I mean, even the chargers we're putting in for the HDVs are the same ones that we were putting in last year for the car market. 350, 400 kilowatt chargers, that's as much as the trucks can take now anyway.
Yeah.
What they are doing is pushing that technology to its limit. However, on the yin to my own yang, and to support your question, I was at the Logistics UK annual conference last week, and I haven't been there for a few years. And when I arrived, all the conversation was about AI, autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, electric infrastructure, grid capacity, in a logistics forum. The last time I was there, none of those things were even on the agenda. So it just goes to show, to your point, I think, that it's not just about moving a vehicle from A to B, it's about everything goes with it. So all of these affiliated markets now need to learn very quickly about all this stuff that they used to either have bunkered fuel or they go off to a refueling station somewhere, and that's how they dealt with their wet fuels. Yeah. Now, there's a whole new world to learn in terms of how we're going to integrate this technology into our depot, how we're going to get the right grid, what solar do we need? Do we need battery storage? Do we need the AI, the systems to start to compute our logistics and operations differently to accommodate this type of technology? So it's becoming a lot more complex in that regard, and people are having to learn very quickly.
Will there be, do you think, Sam, I mean, we have to think about, I suppose, the road to net zero there are many paths to the road to net zero. Some of it will be, do we kind of modify existing fleet with synthetic fuel? Do we look at alternative fuel like hydrogen? Will there be a mixture of electric, hydrogen, synthetic? What do you think the kind of future of the fleets will be in the next 5 to 10 years? Because there's a lot of hardware, as in there's a lot of vehicles on the road that will still be running even after the full switch to EV. Yeah, I mean, look, there's so many different types of option out there, and one of the cheesy phrases always easy to say is there's no silver bullet, but it's true, right? So, some of those technologies will be applicable to help with the overall supply chain and the solution thereof. I'm less convinced that hydrogen is one of those. Certainly on road transport, I think that's unlikely. But I think what is abundantly clear now is electrification is the vast majority, and I would never be one. I don't think any of my colleagues in the EV world would say it's all about electric, because it isn't, because that doesn't solve everything, but it will tackle the vast majority. So that's why I've dedicated my life to electrification, because I think that's where the big chunk can be solved. But yeah, synthetic fuels, potentially hydrogen in trains or other in ports or whatever. Maybe, yeah. And those innovations need to be supported. But I think the main ticket in town is fully electric. I think it certainly feels that way, and it certainly has been that way. Thinking about Move for the last couple of years, this year seems to have been a lot more about, like you say, data, autonomous vehicles. There's been a huge amount actually of the speakers that have been on the podcast today talking about data, AI and autonomous vehicles particularly, and in trucks as well. So actually how you're moving humans and also products autonomously. How does that sort of fit with where you are with GRIDSERVE, with autonomous vehicles, like almost driving themselves to plug in? I don't know how that works. What does that look like?
Well, again, I've been at Move conferences for many, many years, and I agree that, and obviously other contributors feel the same. That AI and data is real key points of the debate here today. I've already had several conversations today talking about robotaxis and autonomous vehicles and how they're likely to be able to plug in and charge without the use of a human to do so in the future, and all of that feels like it's coming, right? So we've got soon to be 5. We've got 4, but 5 electric forecourts across the country. You mentioned one of them at the beginning at Braintree, which is our first one. Those sort of sites lend themselves very well to this potential technology, I think, whereby we already have dedicated HGV bays in some of these locations. We've obviously got dedicated spaces for cars. We've got accessibility bays for larger vehicles or for people with disabilities that need a different provision. And I can see very clearly there will be autonomous vehicle bays that they sort themselves out, right? They'll pull up, they'll park up, the machine will plug them in, they'll do what they got to do, and they'll move on. Particularly, we've got one site in Gatwick, so it's the only electric forecourt in the world that's at a major international airport. And there's places like that where I can see this technology starting to move in, where we've got general passenger or truck charging mingling, if you like, with autonomy. Until at such time, maybe when we're grey and old, or grey and older, where the majority is autonomy. But at the moment, I think, the blend is coming. And you can see that, the autonomous vehicles drive around London. All of a sudden, they're everywhere. They were nowhere a year ago. So
I know.
It's coming, right?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't actually seen them yet, but I don't spend as much time in London as you do probably. So you were hosting a panel earlier on. Just talk a little bit about who was on your panel, what the key topics were, and kind of what the energy was like.
So the panel earlier was all about HGVs and infrastructure, and then we had representatives from the coach and the bus world, actually, as well as myself on the HGV, because that's another area where there's cross collaboration and learning to be done. The bus market is a little bit more advanced in its electrification than, say, coaches and trucks. But more and more, I'm seeing that sort of collaborative desire from different industries that have a common goal, which is decarbonisation, electrification. So it's quite fun to be able to sit on a panel with people in different industries and learn from them and vice versa, so that we continue to grow the message as a collective. So it's nice if people I didn't know are on the panel, which is nice, and it's nice to be able to talk to people and learn things from them as well as share with the audience. So it was good fun.
Yeah. One of the guests earlier on was talking about they actually work to provide the technology for autonomous buses. And the challenge is that there are not enough drivers. They just can't get drivers that want to drive buses. So you think, I think also there's been a shift. The kind of coach and bus industry has kind of gone from everyone needs public transport to there was a drive from governments to get people out of public transport and on the road. And now we're going, actually, maybe we should get them back into public transport again. We need to think about mobility as a holistic solution, which is one of the reasons that this event is so successful, because it does think about connecting it all up. But I think there is a huge amount of opportunity to learn from different speakers, particularly around the world here. We get global people coming in, talking about innovations that are happening in cities across Europe. So it's really interesting to be here. Thinking about the future then, obviously you've kind of had a huge project with significant funding. That's not no mean feat to get some of these big projects underway. What's next for you?
Whoa, what's next? Yeah, I'm not sure how you beat the second largest Innovate UK fund in history, but I've got to try and find a way.
I know. How you beat that gig?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think from a day job perspective, it's a build it and they will come. We've put an awful lot of effort into the build. Now they need to come. So a lot of work needs to go into continuing to work with these fleets, get them comfortable with the infrastructure and the technology that's coming, such that they use it. Because if they don't use it, then we can't keep growing. So that's definitely part of the day job, is to get this infrastructure working and being used regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we've got the network across the country, that we'll see a material shift in that, which is exciting.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, I've got a few world record style challenges and stuff to do this summer. So that should be quite good fun. I've got a few under my belt already, and I've got a few more coming up. So my hobbies seem to be in electric vehicles as well, which is sad, isn't it? But we've got all sorts of different fun and games to be done with GRIDSERVE on the day job, a few challenges here or there, work with EV Cafe. So there's all sorts of stuff to be getting on with. So it's exciting.
I think the work you do with the EV Cafe is brilliant. So when you talk about innovation, and I work in the tech space, the reason we launched the podcast was to educate. So I think first of all, we see innovation, then we have to see education to make sure that technology is being adopted fully. And so that I think there's a real gap. There's a knowledge gap and a skill gap with how, and also a slight kind of, nervousness about using new technology. But we're proving out the cases time and time again that the technology works. The range is longer than you think. You will get there on a single charge probably. And if you don't, then there's somewhere to stop and fill up on the way, or to plug in and charge up on the way. So I think education is going to be really critical. And the EV Cafe does a great job there with some amazing people. We saw Paul Kirby walking past earlier on, heckling from the side.
Yeah, standard.
But actually, this team of people is kind of cross-industry. And if you haven't listened to the EV Cafe, Paul was like, we need to get more numbers. Listen to the EV Cafe, because actually you go out all the time with a group of experts across the whole of the EV industry. So it's the information is readily available on your podcast as well. So there's some great kind of, knowledgeable people talking about all the stuff you need to know. Personal challenges. What are you doing then? Have you got some, there's the EV marathon usually. I don't know what happens. So are you doing some kind of ultra marathon or something?
No, I've, what can I share? So I'm lucky enough to already have 4 Guinness World Records for long distance driving and riding on motorbikes, vans and cars.
Nice. Yeah.
So I've got a bit more of that to do this summer. And then I can't say too much at this point, but let's just say some Chinese OEMs are quite keen to get in on the game, as you could probably predict.
Yeah.
And we're also doing a tire challenge next week as well. So we're testing some non sort of cheap tires versus some very high spec but A-rated efficiency tires designed specifically for electric vehicles, just to see what the differences are. Sorry. So I think all that stuff is fun, but it very much has an important message that it helps to educate, as you say, Jacqui, to the things that people want to know. And so things like the EV Cafe is great for sharing, for communicating, for bringing people together. And I love doing it, but I also love by doing. And I just love being able to do stuff and then talk about it.
Yes.
Because it adds a bit of credibility to the things that you're showcasing and you're trying to celebrate. So I like to keep the mix. So I love the doing and the talking, because I think it's a powerful mix to show, the rest of the world that, you can get this stuff done and make the world a better place, right?
Absolutely right. Well, I think on that bombshell, we should let you go. We called you back for this podcast. Sam Clarke, thank you so much for joining me on this special episode of Drivetime podcast at Move 26. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
Thanks, Jacqui. Thanks for having me.